Hi, everybody. Welcome to the School Community Huddle with Ana Martinez. Today, we are focusing on high school. And today, we have two amazing educators in the Los Angeles area. If you can introduce yourself, years of experience, and the grades that you've taught and the subjects.
I'll go first. Hi, my name is Iris Martin del Campo. I've worked in middle school and high school math settings. So I've taught 6th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, and 11th grade. Ranges from 6th grade, 8th grade math to Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Integrated 1, and that's it.
Yeah, my name's Timothy Gomez. I teach in Huntington Park I've taught middle school and high school. I've done 8th grade, 9th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. And I've taught humanities usually melded together as one course, so history and English together. So I've done U.S. history, I've done economics, I've done, ethnic studies, and I've been teaching for 10 years.
I'm so excited to talk to you all today. Today, we're talking to the parents, we're talking to the high school students, hopefully they're listening too, we're talking to administrators, we're talking to everybody today. And today the topic is a little different than we would normally go. And for the elementary ages, I'm giving parents strategies. We're talking about strategies they can use at home, resources, what they should learn. And those are important because that's the foundational years. We want students to learn how to read, write, and, do and have number sense and understand that. High school is a little different, though. I think high school is when we're preparing them for the next phase of their life, whatever that may be. So I first want to start off with the most important part in high school because so much is changing within them and who their identity is unraveling to become. So let's talk about social emotional learning. What should parents be aware of right now when it comes to social emotional learning and their high school themselves and their high school student?
That's all you go.
I think one of the big things that I think about when I was in high school, you feel the most, you feel everything very intensely, and you don't know why. And I think that's really, really hard to navigate because especially like I'm teaching 9th graders right now who are very different from my 12th graders. My 12th graders were already developing a lot of like social emotional awareness and emotional intelligence. My 12th graders, they come in crying and they're like, Gomez, I need to talk. This happened. This is why I'm sad. This is why what I'm struggling with. Like, just hear me out. And I just want to talk about it. And then I'll go into the classroom. Or Gomez, I'm having a tough day today. Like, I'm probably not going to be that productive, but I swear I'm going to be on it tomorrow. And like the 12th graders could already do that. Whereas my 9th graders, they come in those same like very emotionally intense ways, but they don't know what's going on. They don't know what they're navigating and they don't know what to do with it, right? And that's really, I think as a high school teacher, and I can't say anything about like what to do as a parent, but like I imagine one of the big things is to go, this is what you're feeling and this might be why, or helping guide them towards why, or asking them questions about why. And that's the case when we're on campus and everything's normal and we're together and I'm teaching the kids how to like navigate these things. But we're in a pandemic right now. We're in like a social uprising right now. And these things, we don't even know. We're adults. We don't even know how to navigate it. And so I think that's one of the big things to think about with our high school kids is reminding ourselves constantly to give our kids grace that they're going to be moody. They're going to be, have tough days where they have a hard time getting out of bed. They're going to have days where, maybe they don't want to talk about anything. And to remind ourselves, like, they're processing a lot at once and having no idea what any of it is because their brains just aren't there yet.
Yeah, I agree. So number one, name the feeling. Name the feelings. It's so hard for them to recognize, like he said, what they're actually, so like help them with that vocabulary. And it's something that you can do with elementary as well, right? Just naming those, like, there's not just 3 emotions, happy, sad, and math, right? There's a lot more, and just giving them that vocabulary so they can at least express, like, this is what I'm feeling at this moment, and then maybe you can help them navigate through that the best way that you can.
I really appreciate that. If you're a high school student listening and you're feeling like sad or you're feeling frustrated or just like you don't have energy to get out of bed. It's a normal feeling right now. We're social creatures. You're a social creature. You want to see your friends. You want to see people, and you're not. And so you might only be seeing the people in your home, and you love them, and that's hard, right?
Yes.
If you're a ninth grader or 10th grader and you're new to the school, I think what advice can we give those kids? I mean, none of us have gone through this. So like, it's not like you know exactly what to do, but I'm hearing like a connection to an adult. How can a high school student even begin having a connection with an adult during this time?
I feel for like our quiet students, it kind of worked out, right? You could send emails now. It's like super, like that's like the norm now. You send emails. So emails, if you're really good with your camera, send videos. Any way you can make that connection with your teacher is going to be extremely important under these circumstances. It's already really hard to do that in the classroom when you see them, you actually see them. So now that we're in this situation, that I think that would be the best. Like being a little more proactive of trying to attempt to make connections with that adult. And you're going to have several adults, right? Being a high school student, you have 4, 5, 6 teachers. So if you feel really comfortable with just one, then use that adult. Like it might be really hard to have an amazing relationship with all 6 of them. I get that. But if there's one, anything you see from that adult that you really try your best, because it's really hard for the adult to do that with 150 students. So if you help out in that sense, then it'll make it a lot easier for the adult. So if you could, my advice would be to the high schooler is to put yourself a little bit more out there when it comes to communication, because you will get kind of lost without that.
Yeah. And I think it's also like what I saw in the spring was some of my students who hated being in the classroom, who were really introverted, who, in the big classroom with 30 students, they stuck to themselves or stuck to only their really close friends, super quiet. Those were the kids who actually kind of liked being in distance learning, because we could go into a breakout room with just 2 other kids. They could show up to office hours and maybe it was just me, them, and like 2 other kids or whatever. And it's not like you're in a room in a small group, but there's 25 other kids over there. And so you still feel that kind of anxiety about being around a lot of people. It literally is like, if you do a breakout room, it literally is just you and the teacher or you and somebody else or like whatever. And my introverted kids love that. They opened up. They loved being able to talk. I think it's actually more of a struggle with my extroverted kids, the kids who are used to being around a lot of people and getting energy from other people. I think they're had a much harder time during distance learning, because they didn't get that same reading from other people, that same energy from other people. And I feel like for them, it's kind of like Iris said, they have to really depend on reaching out and just not on just like the natural interactions you have day to day, right? Because that's what they're used to. They're just like, you go into a room and people love them, right? Like that's how I am. Like that's what I'm used to. And I've learned during distance learning, I have to reach out to people if I want to get that attention. I have to tell people what I need. And I think extroverted people aren't used to that. They're used to just walking into a room and everybody's paying attention to them, right? And that's hard.
That's so hard. You know, when I was in high school, I went to a pretty large public high school, and I'm hearing both of you and I'm like, wow, you sound like amazing teachers. And I've seen both of you teach and you have great relationships with kids. But I honestly didn't have that relationship with any of my teachers in this large public high school, nor did I feel like I should. You know, I guess I didn't, and it wasn't invited to. The only person that I think I probably had a little bit more rapport with was my softball coach or coaches. So I'm wondering, like, if somebody does go to a large public high school, if they're a high school student right now and they go to a large public high school and they're new to that school, like how do you even start building a relationship with any adult that's an appropriate relationship, right? So because I want somebody just to talk to or like help me out or give me advice when I need it.
For me, I think when I got to high school, that's when I started. Like, I was a good student in elementary school. I was a pretty good student in middle school. And then high school is where just things kind of went downhill. And like, I struggled a lot in high school, even though I still got decent grades. but I just struggled with the structure of school. And the teachers that I really connected to were the ones who were able to see past where I was in the moment, right? And I was able to read that. Like, I had an English teacher, I had a history teacher who both were like, they saw that I was a hot mess, but they were also like, we know this kid's smart, and we know this kid like is going to be able to do this or that. And so like I found myself more like building closer relationships with them because they saw something authentic in me. And the other thing that I was thinking is like that I always tell my ninth graders is what's important when they're going into high school is just to start asking themselves questions about themselves. Like, what do they care about? What do they think their values are? What are the values that they have that maybe came from their parents and aren't their own? Like, where do they see themselves in 5 or 6 years, whether that's college or whether that's like something else completely? And I think that's a big part of being in 9th and 10th grade is just starting to ask yourself questions about yourself. Like, it's really that time to start thinking about what do I really love? What do I really care about? What really means something to me? I think that's just because that starting point can get you to be like, all right, these are the things I care about. So I think this teacher seems to kind of align with those values. Like, I want to make a relationship with that person.
Yeah. And I think, Anna, you said, what can the student do? I think this is where the teacher comes out, like, right? Like, what can the teachers do? What assignments are you going to do in the first couple of weeks to make sure that you're attempting to get to know your kid? So I think that's where us as the educators, we have to think of like what we're putting out there. And knowing that academics is not going to be as important as it normally is in normal situations, at least at the beginning of the school year. And knowing that it takes a long time to build relationships inside the classroom, that it's going to take a longer time. And the attempt has to be there from the student. Just like I'm asking the students to put themselves out there a little bit more, teachers need to also give themselves time and make sure that they're attempting a lot harder than they would in the classroom. And I know that one of Gomez's really good questions is he always asks the kids, being his partner teacher several times, he says, what are 3 things you're good at? And like kids have such a hard time, or like, what are 3 things that you like about yourself? And the kids would have like such a hard time answering that question. So just like posing questions like that so that they get to start thinking of things that are important to them, but they don't even know how to go about it, I think is important. And just like Gomez, when I was in high school, I was not the best math student. And I loved math. I was just not the best. I wasn't naturally good at it. Like so many people think that that's how you get good at math. But I had a really good teacher who would always notice like, oh, you like solving puzzles, and I see how you're super interested in it. Like if you keep working hard at it, you're gonna get better, right? So I started like loving math because of this one teacher who like noticed that I was like really trying my butt off and I really liked it. So he kind of like gave me like validated like what I was doing was the way to get better at it. And he would tell me like math is like a sport, right? Like if you practice and if you find these ways and you shorter ways and like you can get better at it. And I'm well, okay, cool, let me try it. And like he just saw something in me that I liked as well. So it was kind of like Gomez says, like we as educators have to notice things, have to pay attention to our kids, which is hard when you're teaching a content and you think that that's the only thing that's important, but the whole student is important. And in these times, it's going to be really up to the teacher to find out how they're going to pull those qualities out of their students, because you're not going to see them.
Yeah, just in case there are teachers listening, and I really like that question. I think I want to use that with my nieces and my nephews. I'm wondering, both of you have large cohorts of kids too, right? 100, 150. So how do you build relationships with that many kids? Like, what would be some of your strategies you're going to try this fall?
I'm a big tracker. So like I post questions and like I like try to get 5 kids. And well, before it used to be like make sure to talk to 5 kids. And then I would like literally write down the kids and what questions I would ask and like what their responses were. I get, as I'm getting older, I do forget things. So I literally would have to write them down. When I was younger, I would be like, okay, this kid has 4 siblings. This kid has 2 parents. This kid, like, this weekend's not their weekend with their dad. But like all that. Now I feel like now that I'm a mom and I have so many other things, I literally have to write these things down. So, and just like taking it like 5 students, before I used to be like, make sure I get 5 students from every cohort a week. And so now I don't know what I'm going to try or what, but knowing that tracking things does help. Like, posing the question to everybody. Like for one of my first assignments is going to be tell me your math story, a little video clip of it. And like within that, I'm going to ask specific questions that they have to answer, and they have to record themselves. And I'm going to write down answers that they give me. So that I can have it, so I could have it visible, so that when I'm teaching, I can, like talk to those questions or talk to those things. First, I get to know them, and then I get to see what their interests are, so I get to use that towards the content. So those are like strategies I use.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more clear to me that it's going to be really hard to build relationships right now with the way that with the way that we have to teach, and building relationships in distance learning is going to be probably one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do, because my skill as a teacher, I think like one of my biggest skills as a teacher, and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, like is my personality and is my presence. And when you don't have that, when you're not in a room with somebody, it can be difficult to compensate for that, right? And but I think for me, the number one thing has always been being human in front of my kids. I think I mean, do you know that feeling you get when like you're driving down the road and like a cop car shows up and you tense up, and like, you didn't even do anything wrong, but you still tense up? Like, I feel like a lot of kids feel like that about teachers. Like a lot of kids go into a room and they tense up immediately, because when they think of a teacher, they think of a certain thing, or they think of that time they got in trouble, or they think that time they called their parents, or they think about that time they didn't do the homework assignment, they felt really bad. And I used to feel that with a lot of my teachers. And I think for me, a lot of my work is trying to find ways to disarm that anxiety in my kids. It's not their fault that they feel that way. And so for me, it's like, what can I do to show the kids that I'm human, that I struggled in school, that I may still make mistakes, that I'm still learning, that I am going to adjust the year as we go along, that I'm struggling with the pandemic, right? Like, and I think for me, even the ninth graders, when they see like, okay, like, Gomez makes mistakes too, or Gomez like is going to apologize to me if he did something wrong, or if he had a bad day, or like, like just little things like that go a long way with the kids going just like, oh, okay, like, he's one of us. He's like on our side. And like, not one of us like, oh, we're best friends or whatever, but like one of us, like, I can be myself in front of this person. I can be human in front of this person, because that's like, for me, the first step to building a strong relationship with someone.
I really appreciate that. It's not about the authoritative positionality of teacher or student. It's more like we're teaching these high school students, or we're modeling how to be human, right? Because in a few years, they might be off to college, or might be working, or might be an entrepreneur. Who knows what they're going to do? And are we producing humans that are empathetic, that are kind, that are critical? And if you're a student listening, like, I'm so impressed with you right now. I'm so impressed with this generation. What are we calling them? Gen Z, right? And I have a lot of nieces and nephews who are Gen Zs. I'm impressed with them because of the work and the critical form of thinking that they have, whatever they believe, but the fact that they are educating themselves, they have access to education via their phone. And I wonder about teachers that are listening. We make sure that we're teaching Gen Z and we're pulling out of them the gifts that are kind of innate in them. What advice would you give teachers right now, you in your subject areas?
I mean, I think number one, I think my job as a teacher is, especially when the kids get to high school, like, obviously I'm still teaching them writing skills. I'm still teaching them reading skills. I'm still kind of adding on to the skills that were, that they attained way before me, or I'm helping kids get to a place where they feel comfortable with their reading, all that kind of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, especially with Gen Z that is super social justice minded, especially like, that really open-minded in terms of like gender roles, societal roles, all that kind of stuff. I think my job in a lot of ways is to, number one, get out of their way. like, and let them kind of experiment and figure out like what they feel and what they think and what's real and what's not. And then also just coach them. It's like, how can I, all right, that's what you think. All right, let me give you some articles that like kind of are about that, but also maybe give you a little bit more historical context about that. And like, you know, like balance out your information and all of that. Like, that's my job. It's not my job to start putting them into a box, because I think that's what happened to me a lot when I was a kid. Like when I was a high school kid, like it's like, you need to think this way. You need to dress this way because you're a boy. You need to like look this way, act this way because you're a man. And like you get put into a box that's just like not who you are. And I think it's hard for adults, because I think sometimes we get triggered if something is too radical. We're like, oh, like that's not how we do things in society. But it's like, it can be if we let them.
Yeah, totally agree. As far as math, kids nowadays will ask you, how is that going to help me in the real world, right? Like, tell me when I'm going to use a quadratic formula. And as an educator, you got to be like, shh, I was going to say a bad word right now. But yeah, when are you actually going to use a quadratic formula? You're right. So like making sure that you guys don't just post these things that somebody told you that were important that you have to keep doing. Like sit down and be like, you know what? The quadratic formula helps you think in this way, and lawyers think this way. And then when you have to think of a claim, and like you have to actually have those examples ready to go when they tell you, hey, when is this going to ever help me again? So, or like have those in like your back tool, like, okay, well, you're saving for a house and if it costs this much money, and like you have to give them scenarios that they can see where they're using this. Because when you get to the abstract math, right, it becomes really difficult. So you have to, as an educator, be really prepared to answer those questions when they ask you, because kids will always say, when is this going to help me? When am I going to use this again? So, and I feel like a lot of math teachers can't answer that themselves. So being able to like think critically yourself so that you can allow them to think critically, and they should question you. And I get excited when they question me because I don't want little robots. Right? In math, a lot of open-ended questions that talk about phenomenons is a really good way to get everybody's buy-in, and everybody has an entry point. You don't need sophisticated formulas for it, but just speaking about things that are natural in the world and really open-ended gives everybody, even your SPED population, students with English language learners, anything that they've seen in the world, right? Like you can talk about it, and that makes them feel comfortable. And making sure that you're also expressing how important like communication is, your reasoning. Why do you think that? Explain to me why, not just like the formula and the final answer that we get stuck on. Like, oh yeah, well, math is like a right or wrong way and that's it. No, like there's many different ways of getting there, and like your reasoning is the important part, not just your answer. It's how you got to it. So I think that those are like good ways, and make it relevant, things that they like, things that you know, yeah, they're gonna appreciate.
Yeah, and I also think like as an English teacher, you can't assume that every single student in your class is going to become an English major. And I think that's a big thing that I think happens with teachers, is like they want the kids to learn the subject like they learned it in college, or like how, or whatever, right? And it's like, if I'm teaching Shakespeare, I'm not going to talk about iambic pentameter. They don't need to know that. They're not going to use that in the real world. What I'm going to talk about is like Romeo and Juliet is a good example of toxic relationships within a family and within a relationship. Like that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about like all these weird technical terms that like aren't really going to be useful for them. Maybe it's going to be useful for them when they answer one question on a test that they take 4 years from now, but it's not going to matter to them like when they actually leave my classroom. What's going to matter to them is that they understand how people relate to each other, and like Romeo and Juliet are not a good relationship, that they're like actually a super toxic relationship, and then the relationships that they had with their parents were super toxic as well, and that's what leads to their end in the end. Like that's interesting to me. That's interesting to kids. Iambic pentameter and rhyme scheme and all of that doesn't matter.
That's deep. I really appreciate that, because what I'm hearing from both of you is, one, find a high school student or a teacher, find their interests, right? Like find your own interests. If you're a student, if you're an adult, a teacher, find what they're interested in and connect it to whatever you're teaching. And then two, connect it to the real world, connect it. I am almost thinking like project-based learning, right? Like how can we create critical thinkers creatives so that they're actually producing something. And because like I said, this Gen Z, there were more Gen Zs participating in protests, participating in doing things that, why can't we expect them to create something? They are going to be our future. Why don't we show them that they actually can do whatever they put their mind to? And I really appreciate how you're creating those connections for English into their own lives, right? Relationships or math, purchasing homes, thinking about math in a different practical way. I appreciate that. So I'm wondering for a student like who just feels unmotivated to show up or is not inspired by their teacher and their teacher's teaching in a way that feels, I don't know, hard for them or just not inspirational, not connecting to them. What advice can we give them if the teacher is, because we hope that the teacher is, right? We hope the teacher's making the connection. But as a high school student, what advice do we have for them?
They have the information at their fingertips. Like, you don't like how your teacher's teaching you how to solve quadratic formulas? Literally type that, how to solve quadratic formulas. Find out on your own. There's tons of videos out there. There's YouTube. Don't let the educator be the person that derails your education. Like, you take control of it and find that adult that can help you, and then ask them like, hey, what do I need to know that's important, and go with that. You have a lot of time in your hands right now, and you have, majority of you have your phone and your fingertips. You have the answers to a lot of things, and that would be my advice. Whatever you're curious about, you can figure out on your own, as long as you have that curiosity. So I think that's the important. Be curious.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that other than like find the way to navigate the system. Like you're going to have a million classes that you don't like probably. And like my best strategy for those classes was always like, how do I get out of this class with like a decent enough grade, like learn something, but also with the understanding that like, okay, this isn't going to be my favorite class and that's fine. And like, that's okay. Not every class is going to be my favorite, or not every class am I going to walk away with like the key to the universe. Right. And like, so what can I do? Okay, I'm going to use what's something in this class that's going to be useful for me when I leave, or like, how can I navigate this essay that I have to write, even though it's a really dumb essay or it's a really like irrelevant essay to me. I'm going to try to find a way to approach it in a way that is fun to me. Like, and that's something I did a lot in college, where I was like, I had to take a bunch of English classes where I hated the books, but I was like, all right, how can I make this relevant to me? I'm going to write a personal story or a personal narrative that kind of brings in the evidence from the book, but really isn't even focusing on the book that much. And like, finding ways to like navigate the system, because it just is the way it is right now, and sometimes we just have to navigate it.
I really appreciate that. I think you getting a bad grade in any class does not define that you're intelligent or not intelligent. It might just mean you're not interested. However, we make sure that you're developing skills that you can use anywhere, because you grow up, you have a career or a job or a business. You're not going to like every aspect of it, but what you've taught yourself is like, okay, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to grow through this? And I really appreciate that. I also, for high school students, I mean, I come from a large family, and I was a middle child. So I had 4 siblings that I had to help take care of. What advice do we have for high school students who are in charge of taking care of their younger siblings? Just advice in general for themselves.
It's hard work, and you're super graceful for doing it, and taking care of a loved one is a sacrifice, and you're doing what you need to help out your family, and that's something that it's very valuable. So know that, first of all. Set the example, as if you're the oldest one. Set the example. Set some routines for yourself, and set routines for your siblings. They will model after you for the most part. If you're the oldest one, and if you're not, I think that would be like model after what you would like them to see, because they're paying attention even when you're not teaching them. They're paying attention.
I think it's also And this may be hard for a lot of kids. It may be hard for a lot of parents, but something that I've learned as I've grown older is like boundaries are super important. And I think as high school kids, as you're developing these relationships with your family members, I think it might be good to like, oh, hey mom, like I took care of my brothers and sisters all day. Like, can I just have an hour to myself to like work on my stuff? And like, or can I have like 2 hours? Cause I got to do some homework, but then I also want to call one of my friends. Like, just give me these 2 hours, please. Like, and that's a good way to just like start respecting, like starting to build boundaries that you respect and teaching others to respect your boundaries as well. Because I think a lot of what I've seen is a lot of our kids struggle with that. A lot of our kids struggle with like building those boundaries. And that doesn't mean that you're putting up walls from being with your family. It just means like, this is what I need in order to do that other thing. In order to be the best at taking care of my siblings, I also need my time for myself. And like parents need that too. And I think that's a good way. It's a good time to start doing that.
Yeah, your communication with your parents super important. Like, let them know how your schedule looks or what you have to do so that they're aware. Sometimes parents think we're not doing much, right? So just making sure that you're communicating, like, this is what I have to do, this is how I would like to do it, and I'm also like gonna help out, but can you help me out in this way by giving me XYZ? And like Gomez said, setting your boundaries. So I think communication is going to be really important with the adults in your life, your teachers, your educators, your parents, your friends. So just your communication all around needs to be intact at this time. So start working on that.
And I think it's also important that like, if you're a parent and your kid is telling you what they need, even if it's like, it feels weird and it maybe triggers you a little bit and it makes you feel uncomfortable, to listen to them. Like the fact that a kid is able to kind of work up, like I could never tell my mom when I was in high school what I needed because I was so scared she would yell at me all the time. And so I didn't tell her anything. It ended up making me lie to her more because I was so scared that she would yell at me all the time. And so like, I think that's one of my big pieces of advice. Like, I'm not a parent. Like, I have no idea how hard that job is. I can only imagine. But I think that's one thing as a child of somebody who used to yell a lot and who used to be very easily like triggered is, you know, if I was able to build up the courage to ask my mom for something, I would hope that she would be like, you know what, this is what my kid needs. I'm going to see if this works for us.
I appreciate that. I think sometimes an old school way is like, no, this is how you're going to do it, and that's it. And I want to challenge the parents to we're seeing a lot of messaging around breaking generational trauma and generational things. This is the opportunity, even if it's hard. I know for me with my nieces and nephews, like it's hard because I was like, well, this is how I did it and you're going to do it. And I have the challenge, even as an educator, I have to challenge myself to say, well, why do I do it that way? Like, is there another way for me to do it? And I know watching how hard my dad worked growing up and my mom with all the kids, like I almost felt bad, like, well, how can I not help her? You know? So, but I appreciate, even if you see the need and you want to help out your parents because they're going to yell at you or they're going to get mad at you, or because you just see how hard they're working, you still need your time. You need to give that boundary, like Gomez said, and start advocating for yourself in that way, in a way that's respectful, in a way that's going to help the family, because I think there's a lot of collective values, which is beautiful. That means you have people who have your back too, but you also have to say, and in order for me to strengthen this collective, I need to make sure I'm good, right? And so I really appreciate that. And if you're a high school student listening, and you are not interested in school and you don't like school, and there's so many things at your fingertips right now that you could be interested in. So also be mindful of your social media. Like, what are you following? Who are you being influenced by? Because you can easily find out what you love. Maybe you love art. Maybe you love writing. Maybe you love something, and you're going to figure it out. You're figuring it out. And that's amazing. And I think having educators like Gomez and Iris, I think is so beautiful, because then they help you. But if you don't have any educators that you feel you can connect to, or your family members, you can start asking yourself those questions. Like, what do I like? Where is my attention going? Do I like sports? Do I like this? To make sure that you are becoming the human that you want to become. So we're going to close. Any advice for parents, students or educators out there? Any final thoughts?
That is just like, I think it's super important that like both our kids, like if you're a student listening, and parents, to allow yourself to like see the humanity in your family members, right? Like, so if you're going to ask something of your parent and you're a kid, acknowledge like they had a tough day. I know you were at work all day and I know you're probably tired, but I just really need some time right now to get some of my work done. And if you're a parent, acknowledging the humanity in your kids, like, hey, I know I asked you to take care of the kids all day. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Like, it really means something to me. And I think just having that open humanity both ways, with obviously understanding that parents are parents and kids are kids, but like that goes so far in building like strong relationships with your family and just having a strong community, right?
Yeah, and allowing yourself to make mistakes. Like, we don't know what we're doing. Nobody knows. Nobody has a manual that this is the way that it's supposed to be. So know what's best for you and your family, and try to do the best that you can with that, whatever that means to you and your family.
I really appreciate that. The students that you are going to be surrounded around this year are lucky and amazing to have you. And I'm just so excited for how you're going to learn through this year and grow through this year. I know it's new for all of us. And if you're a parent, an administrator, a student listening, just remember you are enough. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're feeling, like, that's normal. There's no one way to feel right now. We're all human beings. We're all having a plethora of emotions and thoughts. And the thing we want you to know is, like, we love you. We care for you. Take care of yourself. You matter. And we want to make sure that you are becoming the human that you are proud to become, whoever that is, right? That little human inside of you. And if you're an educator, and thank you for all you're doing, have grace with yourself too, as you're exploring and trying new things. It doesn't have to be the way that it's always been. You have that option to like try new things. We're all forced to try new things. So let's not put in old models into this new place, right? Like, let's say this actually wasn't working before. Let me try something different. And I appreciate that. And parents, thank you for all you do. I mean, it's not easy. We know that it's not easy having kids right now and working full time and holding all these emotions. So just take care of yourselves. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. We appreciate you. Until next time. Bye.